This photo was taken by U.S. Army Signal Corps photographer Lieutenant Robert H. Carson by June 14, 1944, Camp Hearn, Texas. It captures a moment he never fully explained in his field journal. 8 German women, dust-covered and exhausted, stand between 2 guards outside a row of wooden barracks. They had arrived in America less than 24 hours earlier, where they were about to be taken, and what they believed would happen next remains written in the tension on their faces. Who were these women? Why were they captured so far from the front lines? And how did the United States end up giving them something far more shocking than punishment? This single frame is the doorway to a story most people have never heard, a story about mercy in a time when mercy seemed impossible. June 14, 1944, Camp Hearn, Texas. The steam rose before the sound did, thin white ribbons drifting across the concrete ceiling. Then the metal pipes hissed, sharp and sudden. In the next breath, 50 German women screamed. Anna Weber froze where she stood, barefoot, thin as a shadow, her hands trembling at her sides. She had been pushed through enough doors in the last 3 weeks to know that nothing good followed the hiss of pipes. Not in France, not during transport, not during intake. Around her, the other women clutched each other, nails digging into cloth and skin. One crossed herself until her knuckles whitened. Another muttered a prayer for her children. A third kept whispering the same sentence over and over in a cracked voice. They said the Americans experiment on prisoners. They said they use gas. The pipes rattled again. A wave of terror swept through the room like a single living thing. Then the water fell. Warm, clean, clear. It splashed against their shoulders, their backs, their hair. Ordinary water, the kind they hadn't felt in months. A sound rippled through the room, not a scream now, but something small and fragile. A sob, then another, then dozens. Knees buckled, hands covered mouths. A few slid down the wall, overwhelmed by the simple warmth trickling across skin that had forgotten softness. For a moment, no one moved. The shock was too enormous to process. Anna put a hand against the tile to steady herself. The warmth soaked into her fingers, as real as her own pulse. She lifted her face into the falling stream and let it run down her cheeks, over her closed eyes. It wasn't death, it wasn't poison, it wasn't punishment, it was a shower. 3 weeks earlier, such a thing would have been unthinkable. In 1944, the world was breaking apart. Europe starved while cities burned. In Germany, rationing had shrunk to near nothing. Watery soup, black bread dense as stone, potatoes measured by weight like gold. Women waited in bomb craters for water. Children scraped frost from windowsills to melt into cups. Hundreds of thousands fled across rubble-strewn roads, carrying only what they could hold. Japan fared no better. Soldiers died with rice bowls empty, their bodies consumed by disease and exhaustion before American bullets reached them. Civilians chewed bark and boiled weeds. Entire towns survived on rumor and smoke. No one in the Axis world had known abundance in years, and no one had known mercy from an enemy in decades. But across the Atlantic, the story was different. America was rising like a giant of steel and wheat. Detroit hammered out tanks faster than Germany could bury theirs. Kansas fields glimmered gold with grain. Shipyards launched Liberty ships at a pace the world had never seen. The arsenal of democracy was not a slogan. It was a reality so vast it could feed allies, supply armies, and still have enough left to feed the men and women it captured. 96,000 aircraft in a single year, 8 million tons of shipping iron, factories that never slept, and at the backbone of it all stood a generation Americans today speak of with reverence, the greatest generation. Young men who left farms, factories, and classrooms not just to win a war, but to defend a code of honor older than the nation itself: fair play. Mercy in victory. The belief that strength meant restraint, not cruelty. It was into this world, this strange, paradoxical world, that Anna Weber and 49 other German women were delivered by train, by truck, by fear. They had braced for torture, for humiliation, for death. They found cowboys. Anna still remembered her first sight of them earlier that morning. Men taller than any she had seen in Europe, shoulders broad from years of ranch work, shirts tucked into dust-covered jeans. They didn't shout, they didn't glare. One even tipped his hat in a polite gesture she did not understand. The sight alone had rattled the women. The propaganda films back in Germany had described Americans as weak, decadent, racially polluted, confused people who relied on machines because they lacked the discipline and strength of true soldiers. But these men? They looked carved from the land itself. One guard, a man with a sun-beaten face and eyes the color of denim, had spoken to them in slow, careful German as they climbed down from the truck. "Welcome to Texas," he'd said. "Follow the line. You'll be fine." Fine. The word felt absurd. Nothing about captivity could be fine. Yet everything in America looked impossibly orderly. Clean-swept gravel paths, wooden barracks standing in neat rows, a mess hall that smelled faintly of bread, real bread, not the coarse bricks they had eaten in Europe. Even the air felt different. Dry, warm, bright, with a sun that seemed less interested in punishing and more in revealing. None of the women trusted it. So when the soldiers led them into a concrete room with metal pipes overhead, fear slammed back into them with full force. No one explained it. No one told them it was a shower. The guard stepped back, closed the heavy door, and left them in the echoing stillness. And then the water fell. Anna didn't mean to cry. She had survived bombings, ration lines, the collapse of her unit in France, the terror of capture, a transatlantic voyage in a dark cargo hold. She had learned to swallow tears, to make her face a shield. But now, standing ankle-deep in water that swirled clean around her feet, she felt something inside her loosen, a knot that had been pulled tight for years. The woman beside her, Greta, covered her face with both hands, shoulders shaking. Another laughed, an unsteady, hysterical sound, then sobbed harder. Someone whispered, "We are alive. We are truly alive." A moment later, the door opened again. A tall American sergeant stepped inside, looked at the trembling crowd, and without a word, stepped, fully under the cascading water. Boots, uniform, hat, and all. He reached up and let the water run through his fingers. Then he pointed at the faucets, smiled gently, and spoke through the translator. "It's just water, nothing more." Shock rippled through Anna's chest all over again. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was disbelief, bewilderment, and something she didn't dare name. This was not the enemy she had been taught to expect. This was something entirely different. And as the warm water continued to fall, washing ash, dirt, and terror from her skin, she felt the first flicker of a question that would haunt her for months. Why would America treat its enemies like this? A question that would lead her deeper into a country unlike anything she had imagined, a country powerful enough not to be cruel. Fear had a smell. Anna knew that now. It clung to fabric, to skin, to breath. It lived in the creases of the gray Luftwaffe auxiliary uniform she had worn for weeks without washing. It soaked into her hair, tangled and stiff with dust. Even after the warm water of the American shower washed over her minutes before, the smell still lingered inside her, an old, sour fear she had carried across a collapsing continent. As she stepped out of the bathhouse, her legs still trembling, the memories came back in sharp, merciless flashes. She had been a radio operator on the outskirts of Caen when the Allied breakthrough tore through northern France like a storm of steel. Her unit had been overrun in a matter of hours. She remembered the ground shaking. She remembered the smoke. She remembered gripping her headset so tightly her fingers went numb while her commanding officer shouted contradictory orders into her ear. And she remembered the moment she realized no one was going to save them. They fled. That was what the official report would have said. Strategic withdrawal. But it wasn't strategic. It was panic. Women running through the forest with boots slipping in mud, glancing behind them for tanks that never appeared, tripping over roots and prayers, carrying only what fit in their pockets. When the American patrol found them at dawn the next day, Anna had braced for the worst. Every briefing she'd ever sat through told her what capture meant. Americans torture. Americans humiliate. Americans kill POWs. It had been said so many times it echoed inside her skull like scripture, so when she raised her hands that morning, cold and shaking, she expected a rifle butt to the jaw. She expected to be dragged by her hair. She expected boots, dogs, spit. She received none of it. A young American soldier, a boy, really, younger than she was, stepped forward and said the strangest thing she had ever heard. "Ma'am, are you hurt? Do you need water?" Water. He had offered her water. For a moment she thought it was a trick. It had to be a trick. The days that followed blurred into a nightmare of movement. Trucks, checkpoints, and rail cars that smelled of rust and sweat. Anna and dozens of other captured auxiliaries were loaded into a freight car with narrow slits for ventilation. There were no seats, no room to sit. They stood pressed together in oppressive heat, bodies swaying with the motion of the train. The air tasted like iron. Their throats burned from thirst. Their wrists ached from rough rope binding them in pairs. Every sound was amplified. The groan of wheels, the metallic clatter of couplings, the occasional barked command from guards they could not see. At night, when exhaustion finally blurred fear into numbness, Anna listened to the whispers around her. Some cried silently. Some prayed. Some repeated propaganda in broken loops as though rehearsing a shield. They hate us. They will hurt us. They will kill us. We must be strong. They have no honor. They are not like us. They are monsters. But Anna's greatest fear was not death. It was humiliation, being stripped, mocked, broken, and the Americans would excel at that, her superiors had promised. When the train finally stopped on American soil, the doors burst open to a blinding wash of sunlight. They stumbled out, legs weak, blinking like animals dragged from a cave. Anna had expected snarling dogs. She expected shouting. She expected the same treatment German camps inflicted on their enemies. Fear as a greeting, cruelty as a lesson. Instead, she saw cowboys. Literal cowboys. Men in dusty boots and sun-beaten hats leaned against a fence, chewing tobacco and sipping water from metal canteens. One of them gave a casual nod. "Welcome to Texas, ladies. Stay in line now." The tone wasn't harsh, not even annoyed. It was polite, courteous, almost embarrassed. Anna thought she had misheard the translator. America was not supposed to be polite. Her fear sharpened because of it. Kindness, she had been taught, was a lure, a trap, a way to make prisoners lower their guard before the real cruelty began. So when a guard handed her a tin cup filled with cold water, she hesitated. The cup trembled in her hand. Was it drugged? Was she being tested? Would she drink and collapse while they laughed? The guard noticed her hesitation and softened his voice. "It's clean, ma'am. Go on." Something in the gentleness unsettled her even more. Fear clawed inside her. Why were they being treated like human beings? The intake building intensified her dread. Women were led into a long hall with rows of wooden benches and lockers. American nurses, not soldiers, waited with clipboards, pencils tucked behind their ears. Nurses, female, smiling. Anna's heart thudded painfully. This wasn't right. Nothing about this resembled anything she'd been told, but every step forward made her fear worse, not better. When a nurse asked her to remove her shoes so they could inspect for injuries, Anna flinched violently. When one reached gently to touch a bruise on her arm, she recoiled as though expecting a strike. Eventually, the women were moved again, this time toward the bathhouse. But no one explained what was happening. Anna walked into the concrete room, felt the cold floor under her bare feet, saw the metal pipes overhead, heard the door slam shut behind them, and every nightmare scenario erupted inside her head. The other women reacted first, screams ripping through the room like tearing cloth. Anna's breath seized. She pressed back against the wall. Her pulse crashed in her ears. Her fear was total, full body, electric. When the pipes hissed, she was certain she would die, and when the water came, warm, clean, harmless, her legs nearly buckled from the force of relief and confusion. Even after the shower, fear followed her like a shadow. When the women were led to the mess hall an hour later, Anna expected the trick to reveal itself. The hall smelled unnervingly like home, bread baking, onions frying, meat sizzling on a hot skillet. Nothing in her life prepared her for the sight of Americans serving enemies fresh food. Long tables were laid out with plates. Plates, real plates, not tin ration bowls, with actual portions. Steak, potatoes mashed with butter, green beans, bread soft enough to leave fingerprints. Greta, beside her, whispered, "This is our last meal. Poison, surely." And Anna believed her. Good things didn't happen in war, not to prisoners, not to women, not to enemies. A kindness this large had to hide a blade. When an American cook waved her forward and placed a steak on her tray, Anna's hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped it. "Eat up," he said, cheerful, as if he were talking to a neighbor. "Long trip, huh?" She stared at him, at the food, at the guards who weren't pointing guns, weren't shouting, weren't smirking. Fear twisted tighter, sharper. If this wasn't cruelty, if this wasn't a trap, then what was it? Why were they being treated with dignity? It made no sense, and that made it even more terrifying. Because Anna Weber, trained to believe Americans were savages, now faced something far more dangerous to her understanding of the world. Mercy. Something was happening in this strange country, something she did not have words for yet. But she knew this much. Fear was no longer about what the Americans might do. Fear was about what she might discover if they didn't do it. The kindness began so quietly, so plainly, that Anna almost missed it. It did not arrive like a revelation or a speech. It came in the form of a man standing in a puddle, dripping water from the brim of his hat. The American sergeant who had stepped under the shower with them lingered near the doorway as the women dried themselves with towels that smelled faintly of cotton and soap. His uniform clung to him, soaked through. The blue fabric darkened nearly black. Water dripped from his sleeves and fell onto the concrete floor in slow, rhythmic taps. He offered a small, apologetic smile. "Sorry we scared you," he said through the interpreter. We should have explained." He removed his hat then, slowly, respectfully, and looked at them not as enemies, not as prisoners, but as human beings who had been through too much. The gesture alone, that simple tilt of the head, was something Anna had not felt directed toward her in years. Respect. The word felt foreign. As the women were escorted out of the bathhouse, the sergeant held the door open for them, still dripping, still watching them with a softness that unsettled Anna more than hostility ever could. They walked toward the mess hall in a line, guarded but not driven. No one shouted. No one pushed. The sun had begun to rise higher, warming the Texas earth, lifting the scent of dust and sage into the air. Anna's hair, still damp from the shower, clung to the back of her neck. But for the first time since her capture, her skin no longer felt coated with the grime of fear and travel. The water had washed away more than dirt. It had washed away certainty. Ahead, a wooden building with wide screen doors let out a smell so rich she felt breath catch in her throat. Meat sizzling. Bread baking. Coffee, real coffee, not roasted grain substitute. Butter warmed on a hot stove. Every step closer intensified the scent until her stomach clenched violently, unsure whether it was hunger or disbelief. Inside, long tables were set with plates, tin cups, and polished cutlery. A tall man, wearing an apron and a Stetson hat, stood behind the counter. His beard was red, his shoulders broad, his hands marked with old burns and calluses. He looked more rancher than soldier, and he looked cheerful. "Morning, ladies," he said in slow English, smiling as if he were welcoming guests to his own kitchen. "Hope you're hungry." Hungry. The word felt like a joke. They had been hungry for years. Greta whispered harshly, "It's a trap. They fatten us first." Anna believed it. She had to believe it. Anything else was too impossible. But when she stepped forward, tray trembling in her hands, the man behind the counter placed a slice of warm cornbread beside a generous helping of scrambled eggs. Then he added a thick cut of steak still steaming from the skillet. He did not look like someone committing cruelty. "You need meat on those bones," he said softly. Anna's mouth went dry. The women sat cautiously. Some stared at their plates without touching the food. Others sniffed each item suspiciously, as if poison could be identified through scent alone. A few whispered frantically, trying to convince themselves that this was manipulation, psychological warfare, something familiar enough to understand. But then the first fork clinked. A single bite disappeared. A gasp followed, sharp, disbelieving. And after that, the room filled with the sound of hesitant eating, forks scraping plates, quiet sobs, the hum of confusion more than comfort. Anna did not pick up her fork immediately. She waited, watching the Americans move about the room with calm, steady efficiency. The guards were relaxed, rifles slung casually over shoulders, their posture more like men overseeing a school cafeteria than a room full of enemy combatants. One of them, a young private with dark hair and a Texas drawl so thick she could scarcely understand, approached her table. "You all right, ma'am?" he asked gently. The question stunned her. No one had asked her that since the war began. She nodded stiffly, unable to speak. He tipped his head. "If you need anything, holler." Holler. Another foreign word. Another crack in her understanding of the world. The first true act of kindness came after breakfast. The women were led to a medical station for examination. Again, Anna braced for humiliation. She expected rough hands, cold commands, ridicule for injuries sustained during retreat. Instead, she found a room filled with sunlight and two American nurses, both young, both composed, both wearing clean white uniforms. They moved with the calm confidence of people who knew their work mattered. One approached Anna, her voice gentle. "Sit. Please, you're safe." Safe. Another impossible word. The nurse lifted Anna's arm, revealing a deep bruise where she had collided with a tree trunk during the retreat through France. The nurse frowned with professional concern. "How long ago?" she asked the interpreter. 4 days, Anna whispered. The nurse reached for a small bottle, uncorked it, and the scent of antiseptic filled the air. Sharp, clean, trusting. She dabbed the bruise tenderly, wrapping it with practiced skill. Anna winced at the touch, not from pain but from the unfamiliar ache of being cared for. When the nurse moved to bandage another cut on Anna's hand, she murmured, "You hold on tight, don't you?" It took Anna a moment to understand. Then she realized the nurse was referring to the way she clenched her fist, as if preparing for a blow. She forced her fingers to relax. The nurse smiled. "You're all right now." It felt like a confession. What Anna didn't know, not yet, was that these acts of kindness were not random. They were not accidents of circumstance or softness. They were policy. They were identity. The United States had made a decision early in the war. Prisoners of war would be treated humanely, fed well, housed safely, and cared for medically. Not only because the Geneva Convention required it, but because Americans believed it was the right thing to do. "We don't treat people the way the Nazis do," one guard told another as they walked past the clinic. "We're Americans." The words reached Anna's ears like a shock wave. Americans, as if the word itself explained mercy, as if kindness was not a choice but a defining trait. Back home, she had been taught that Americans were a chaotic, undisciplined, morally broken society. A melting pot of weakness. A nation without culture or tradition. But here, in this quiet, sunlit clinic in Texas, 2 nurses knelt to rewrap the swollen ankle of a German woman who had limped through France, and the American sergeant stood nearby, arms folded, watching with the solemn respect he would have shown a wounded American boy. Anna did not understand any of it. She only knew her fear had begun to shift. Not disappear. Fear stayed, clinging like smoke, but rearrange itself into confusion, into curiosity, into the beginning tremor of doubt. That afternoon, the women were taken outside for orientation. A captain in a neatly pressed uniform explained through the translator the rules of the camp. No striking of prisoners. No forced labor beyond what was permitted by international law. No deprivation of food, water, or medical care. 3 meals a day, rest days on Sundays. Access to a camp library. Opportunities for work assignments that paid small wages redeemable in the canteen. A woman behind Anna fainted from shock. When order returned, the captain continued. "You will be treated with dignity," he said, "regardless of uniform, regardless of nationality." He paused, letting the words settle. "You are human beings. That is enough." It was the kind of sentence Anna had not heard spoken publicly in Germany in years. Human beings. Not Aryans, not enemies, not instruments of war, just humans. The softness of the idea frightened her. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed Camp Hearn in amber light, Anna found herself standing near the fence line, uncertain why she had wandered there. A cowboy, one she recognized from breakfast, stood nearby tossing feed to chickens. He caught her staring and tipped his hat. "You settling in okay?" he asked kindly. She didn't respond, couldn't. He shrugged, not offended. "Give it time. Texas grows on people." Grow. The word was strange to her, used in that way, but something about the cowboy's tone, warm, patient, sincere, lodged itself inside her like a small spark. She thought about the shower, the steak, the medical bandages, the sunlight and cotton towels, and the strange gentleness that seemed woven into the very soil of this country. None of it made sense, but as she touched the clean bandage on her arm, she felt something she had not felt since before the war, a feeling she hardly recognized. Relief. Not trust, not yet, but the first step toward it. A fragile, trembling step. And though she tried to bury the thought as quickly as it appeared, it rose anyway, stubborn as a wildflower breaking through cracked earth. What if the Americans are not like what we were told? What if mercy was real? What if this was, impossibly, what winning with dignity looked like? The moment that broke her came quietly. So quietly Anna almost mistook it for something ordinary. But nothing was ordinary anymore, not in this country where nothing behaved the way fear had taught her. It happened on her third morning in Camp Hearn. The women were guided once again to the bathhouse, this time with less trembling, less whispering. The terror had not disappeared, but it had retreated, curled like a wounded animal in the corner of their minds. Anna followed in silence, still unsure if each step carried her toward comfort or deception. Inside, the air smelled faintly of soap. Not harsh disinfectant, not chemical sting, not the sharp bitterness of military delousing powder. It smelled clean, soft, almost sweet. Anna froze mid-step. Years of deprivation had made her forget the scent of real soap, of something made without ration substitutes, without fillers, without desperation. But as the scent drifted toward her, warm and honest, something inside her loosened with a painful jolt. She reached out instinctively, fingers brushing the folded towel stacked on a wooden bench. Cotton, thick, white, the kind she remembered from childhood, before the war, before the world shrank to hunger and obeyed the sound of boots. Her fingertips sank into the fabric. It was soft, softer than anything she had touched in years, softer than anything she had believed existed anymore. Her hand trembled violently. The towel slid from her grip and fell to the floor, and just like that, she broke. Her knees buckled and she folded onto the concrete, hands covering her face as sobs tore free, raw, uncontrollable, unrestrained, the kind of sobs that came not from weakness, but from the sudden collapse of something she'd been holding up inside her for far too long. Beside her, Greta knelt, arms wrapping clumsily around her shoulders. But Anna barely felt it. Her body shook with a grief she could not name, grief for the lies she'd believed, for the brutality she expected, for the simple softness of a towel that felt like forgiveness. She cried for the girl she had been before the war, for the life she had lost, for the enemy who had shown her mercy she no longer understood. The room blurred, water pooling beneath her palms. She didn't care. She couldn't stop. Years of fear and indoctrination were melting off her skin like dirt beneath warm water. When she finally looked up, blinking through tears, the American sergeant, the same one who had stepped into the shower fully clothed days earlier, was standing near her. He didn't shout. He didn't tell her to get up. He didn't accuse her of weakness. Instead, he crouched slowly until he was level with her, his voice steady and impossibly gentle. "Ma'am," he said, "you're all right. You're safe here." The words shattered her all over again. Safe. How could safety feel so unbearable? She felt her mouth open before she realized she was speaking. "Why?" her voice cracked. "Why you kind?" It was all she could say, all she could manage, a single question that held every broken truth inside her. The sergeant looked at her for a long moment, really looked at. Her, past the uniform, past the nationality, past the fear. Then he answered in a tone that carried no pride, no self-importance, no expectation of thanks. "Because you're human." He didn't say it like a slogan. He said it like a fact. Another tear slipped down Anna's cheek, hot against her cool skin. "We don't feed prisoners," he added quietly. "We feed people." Anna stared at him, unable to comprehend a world where such a sentence existed. She had been taught that kindness was weakness, that mercy was manipulation, that enemies deserved neither. But here, in a simple Texas bathhouse, a man who had every reason to hate her offered her a truth she had never considered, that victory did not demand cruelty, that strength did not require dehumanizing others, that Americans saw dignity not as a reward, but as something inherent. Her throat tightened again, but the sob that rose was different this time, softer, less frantic. A sob of surrender, not to an enemy, but to the realization that the world was bigger, kinder, and more complicated than she had been told. The breakdown deepened at lunch. The women entered the mess hall, cheeks still flushed from the showers, hair damp and clean. Anna walked slowly, as though each step might trigger another unseen trap. The smell hit first, smoked meat, pepper, butter melting into warm cornbread. Cowboys moved behind the counter, lifting heavy iron skillets with practiced ease. One, the red-haired cook from her first breakfast, waved her forward. "Got something special for you today," he drawled. "Texas bacon." Bacon. The word alone felt like a memory she had stopped allowing herself to remember. He placed 2 crisp strips on her tray, edges curled perfectly, fat glistening beneath the light. The scent rose immediately, rich, smoky, impossibly comforting. Her legs weakened. She hadn't tasted real bacon in years. Most civilians in Germany hadn't tasted it since before the war. The luxury of it, the impossible abundance of it, overwhelmed her senses. She lifted a piece to her mouth. Her hand shook so violently she almost dropped it. The cook noticed. "Easy," he said softly. She bit into it. The flavor hit like lightning. Salt, smoke, warmth, memory. Her vision blurred. Her breath hitched, and before she could stop herself, she burst into tears again, shoulders curling inward as she clutched the tray to her chest. Around her, other women stared, some stunned, some equally shaken. One dropped her own fork and covered her mouth. Another whispered, "This cannot be real." The cook stepped closer. "You okay, ma'am?" Anna pressed her palm to her eyes, choking on the truth spilling out of her. "It tastes like home," she whispered. The cowboy swallowed, expression softening. He wasn't a commander or a diplomat. He was a cook who understood homesickness the way only those who'd left home could. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Then eat, ma'am. No one's going to take it from you." No one's going to take it from you. Words she had not heard in a lifetime. Anna wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, overwhelmed by the magnitude of it all. She looked around the room, at the Americans serving food without hatred, at the guards carrying themselves with quiet dignity, at the German women trying to reconcile kindness with everything they had believed. It was too much. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. Because something inside her had broken open, and through that crack, light was entering. Later that evening, as she sat on her bunk writing the first lines of a letter she did not know would be censored, she paused, hand hovering above the paper. She had been taught her enemy was monstrous, but today, for the first time, her enemy had made her feel human. Not as a privilege, not as a tactic, but as a principle. And that realization, the enormity of it, was what finally shattered her old world completely. She lowered her pencil and whispered into the quiet barracks, "Why? Why you do this?" The answer she had heard earlier echoed back, gentle and unyielding. "Because you're human. Because it's the right thing." In the days that followed, something shifted inside Anna, quietly, steadily, like dawn pushing against the edge of night. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't dramatic. It came in small realizations that gathered into something undeniable. The first was silence, not the silence of fear, which she had known too well in Germany, not the silence of hiding in cellars during bombings, but a peaceful silence, an absence of shouting, of punishment, of boots crashing against concrete. No one struck them. No one cursed at them. No one dragged them by their hair for being too slow. The guards spoke with a calm professionalism she had never seen in her own officers. If a woman dropped a tray, an American soldier bent to pick it up. If someone stumbled, a guard offered an arm. If someone wept, the Americans looked away. Not out of indifference, but out of respect for dignity. It bewildered her. She had been taught that Americans were crude, violent, undisciplined, but here, in a camp surrounded by barbed wire and patrolled by armed men, she felt something she had not felt in years. Safety. The second realization came during work assignments. The women were taken outside the camp to pick vegetables and tend gardens that fed both prisoners and staff. The sun beat down heavy and warm, but the work was manageable, even gentle compared to what the Reich had demanded. In Germany, labor was punishment. In Camp Herne, labor was routine, structured, reasonable, and rewarded with rest breaks. One morning, as Anna knelt in the soil beside a row of squash plants, she overheard two American guards talking under the shade of a live oak tree. "They treat their people worse than this?" one asked. "From what I've heard, yes," the older guard replied. "Hitler's got 'em starving." "Hard to believe." "Not if you've seen the newspapers. Berlin's half rubble now." Anna's hands stilled on the vines. She stared at the earth, her breath caught between disbelief and grief. Half rubble. She had known. She had feared. But hearing it from the mouth of an enemy made it feel final. Her home, Munich, had already been burning when she left. Bread lines stretched for blocks. Children scraped for coal in bombed-out houses. Her mother traded family heirlooms for potatoes. A city that had once been known for music and markets and old churches now survived on dust and ration stamps. Yet here in America, prisoners were fed steak, vegetables, eggs, coffee. 3,000 calories a day, more than her own people. The moral math made her dizzy. Why would a nation feed its enemies better than Germany fed its own children? The question lodged deep inside her, heavy and sharp. The third realization came unexpectedly, in the camp library. She found it by accident, following Greta and two other women who had heard rumors of books. The building was small but tidy, shelves lined with English novels, history texts, dictionaries, even German volumes donated by local families who believed a good book should be read by anyone. Anna ran her fingertips along the spines. Stories, knowledge, ideas, freely available to prisoners. A corporal at a desk looked up. "Y'all can borrow anything," he said. "Just bring it back when you're done." She opened a book on American geography, flipping through pages filled with rivers, mountains, farms, and cities that stretched wider than she had ever imagined. A country with enough land to feed armies, enough factories to build a world, enough abundance to shelter even its enemies. America won the war with steel, yes. But as she turned those pages, she realized something else. America also won with generosity, with fairness, with moral certainty, with a belief that victory meant proving the enemy wrong, not by cruelty but by doing better. Her awakening deepened when the Red Cross visited. German Red Cross officials had inspected camps in Europe during the early years of the war. Anna had heard stories, how they looked the other way, how they ignored bruises and starvation, how they reported lies back to Geneva. But here, in Texas, the Red Cross arrived with notebooks and cameras, interviewing prisoners privately, noting any complaints, verifying food quantities, examining medical supplies, inspecting living quarters. Nothing was hidden. No fear lingered in the air. No anxiety dulled the prisoners' voices. This, Anna realized, was not how a nation behaved when it intended harm. It was how a nation behaved when it believed in its own principles. She watched the Red Cross workers leave with calm expressions and thought, "They have nothing to hide, nothing to fear, nothing to be ashamed of." The thought made her chest ache. A few days later, during a break from work detail, Anna sat beneath a pecan tree with several other women. The afternoon heat softened around them. In the distance, cowboys moved cattle with lazy confidence, calling out commands that blended with birdsong and the hum of insects. Greta was the first to speak. "I never thought," she murmured, voice small, "I never thought enemies would treat us better than home." Another woman, Elise, nodded. "German soldiers would never do this. Not for English women. Not for anyone." Anna drew her knees to her chest, pressing her forehead against them. Her mind churned with memories. Propaganda films showing Americans as monsters, radio broadcasts describing barbarism, military instructors warning them that surrender meant unspeakable torture. But here, the only thing she had been given was kindness. She whispered, almost to herself, "Everything we were told was wrong." The words hung in the warm air, heavy with truth. That evening she found herself standing by the fence again, watching the sun bleed orange across the horizon. An American guard, Private Miller, the one with the soft voice, approached with a cup of iced tea. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked. It was becoming his daily question. She hesitated before answering. "Yes, I think so." He offered her the cup through the fence. She took it gingerly, tasting the sweet, cold tea that melted across her tongue like relief itself. Miller leaned on the post. "You know," he said, "my granddad always told me something. Said you judge a nation not by how it treats its friends, but how it treats its enemies." Anna looked down at the cup in her hands. Enemies. Was that what she still was? Miller continued, quiet and steady. "We ain't perfect here, but we try to do right. Even when it's hard, even when folks disagree. That's America." The tea trembled slightly as Anna's fingers tightened around it. This was the moment she understood something larger than herself, larger than the camp, larger than the war. America didn't treat them kindly because it was easy. America treated them kindly because it believed in something bigger, something stronger, something the Reich had never understood. A nation could win battles with guns, but only a moral nation could win the hearts of its enemies. She whispered, "Why do you help us?" Miller adjusted his cap, eyes scanning the sunset. "Because we don't win by being cruel," he said. "We win by being better." The truth of it struck her like a blow. Ethical supremacy. She didn't know the term, might not have understood it yet, but she felt it, deeply, powerfully, like sunlight warming the scars of a long winter. That night, lying in her bunk, Anna stared at the wooden ceiling and realized the war had ended for her long before Germany surrendered. It had ended the moment she saw what America really was. Not a land of monsters, but a land of contradiction and compassion, strength and mercy. A land that fed prisoners its own food while cities in Europe starved. A land that followed laws even when no one watched. A land that treated its captives with more dignity than the Reich had ever shown its own people. America, one with abundance. America, one with decency. America, one with restraint. And as she closed her eyes, a quiet gratitude stirred inside her, unexpected, profound. She whispered into the darkness, "Thank you." Not to a guard, not to a country, but to fate itself, for delivering her to a place where humanity still mattered. By late summer, Camp Hearn no longer felt like a battlefield of fear. It felt, impossibly, confusingly, like a small, self-contained world where enemies slowly became something else. Not friends, not yet, but something warmer than strangers, gentler than prisoners. Anna sensed the change first in the way she carried herself. She stood straighter. She walked with less tension in her shoulders. She no longer flinched every time a guard passed. Something inside her that had been compressed for years was unfolding, hesitant but hopeful, like the cautious opening of a flower after a long, brutal frost. The first moment she truly felt like a human being again happened on a quiet afternoon behind the infirmary. A chaplain approached, gray-haired, soft-spoken, his uniform neat but worn from long days. He held a small object wrapped in cloth. When he reached her, he extended it with two hands, a gesture of respect she had not received from any authority figure since before the war. "For you," he said gently. She unwrapped it and froze. A Bible. The leather cover was cracked at the edges, clearly well used. It was the kind of object no one in Germany would have entrusted to a prisoner. Anna lifted it with care, half expecting it to be taken back, but the chaplain simply nodded. "You may read it if you like. If not," his smile deepened, "it still belongs to you." The gift struck her with a force she did not expect. It wasn't the religious meaning, not entirely. It was the trust, the quiet dignity extended to someone the world had labeled enemy. She whispered, "Why give this to me?" "Because," he said, "every soul deserves something of their own." She didn't cry then. She saved that for later, when she lay on her bunk and traced the worn spine with shaking fingers, realizing she could not remember the last time anyone had given her anything without expecting obedience in return. Other acts of humanity followed in subtle, disarming ways. During work detail one morning, Anna sprained her wrist lifting a crate. A medical officer saw her wince and led her back to the infirmary, insisting she sit while he examined it. He taught her how to wrap it properly, demonstrating the technique twice, then gently guiding her hands through the motions. "You tie it too tight. You cut the circulation," he said, his voice warm. "Do it like this. Firm, but kind. Firm, but kind." It sounded like a philosophy, not medical advice. Later, she watched him teach a Japanese prisoner how to clean and bind a wound using Red Cross standards. The Japanese soldier bowed deeply, murmuring gratitude in broken English. The doctor bowed back. Anna had never seen officers in Germany treat subordinates that way, let alone prisoners. The contrast carved a new space in her understanding. America was not strong because it humiliated enemies. It was strong because it didn't need to. Then came the horses. One blazing afternoon, the women were assigned to help on a ranch outside the camp perimeter. A cowboy named Earl, lean, sun-soaked, his hat older than he was, approached with several horses saddled and waiting. When the women hesitated, Earl grinned. "Don't worry," he said, patting a chestnut mare. "She won't bite. She's friendlier than most folks I know." The women laughed nervously, exchanging looks of disbelief. The idea that American guards would put prisoners, enemy prisoners, on horses worth small fortunes was absurd. Beyond absurd. Madness. But Earl lifted Anna into the saddle with the ease of a father hoisting a child onto a carousel. Feet in the stirrups, back straight, let her feel you're steady. Anna grabbed the reins, heart pounding. "Trust her," Earl said. "A horse knows when you're scared, and when you're brave." The mare took a slow step, then another. Soon Anna was moving across the Texas grass, the horizon stretching endlessly in all directions, wind lifting her hair, saddle warm beneath her. A strange, forgotten sensation fluttered in her chest. Freedom. For the first time since crossing the Atlantic, she felt air fill her lungs without pain. She felt weight leave her shoulders. She felt alive. Greta called out from across the paddock, laughing wildly as her own horse carried her forward. The sound didn't echo like it did in Germany's ruined streets. It belonged here, where the land felt generous and the sky had room for joy. The connection deepened in moments small enough to miss if one wasn't paying attention. During evening free time, a group of American guards practiced folk songs near the fence. One night they attempted a German melody, stumbling awkwardly through the lyrics. Anna, surprised, corrected them softly, their faces lit with amusement. "Say it again," Private Miller asked. "Slower this time." She repeated the line, and soon the men were singing it back, their accents heavy but earnest. The women joined in, voices blending across the fence in a harmony that blurred borders neither government could erase. Another evening, the women practiced English phrases while the guards listened with patient encouragement. "Howdy," Greta tried. Miller laughed. "You gotta stretch it out. How-dee." They practiced until the women could say it without blushing. In return, the women taught the guards a Bavarian lullaby. Miller tried to hum along and failed spectacularly, causing the entire group to break into laughter warm enough to fill the entire yard. In those moments, the kind the war never documented, humanity passed quietly from one side to the other. But nothing built connection like food. One Sunday, a local ranch family arranged a meal for the POWs assigned to their farm. Under American rules, guards had to remain present, but the tone was unmistakably domestic. A supper, not a transaction. Anna sat at a long wooden table beneath a porch draped in vines. A pitcher of sweet tea glistened with beads of condensation. Plates arrived stacked with roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans simmered with bacon fat, and warm rolls brushed with butter. The rancher's wife, Mrs. Harrison, placed a dish in front of Anna and smiled as if setting food before a neighbor rather than a prisoner. "Eat, sweetheart," she said simply. "You look half-wind." Anna's throat closed. She had not been called sweetheart since she was a girl. After the meal, they sat in the yard under a massive live oak tree, its branches giving shelter like a cathedral roof. Fireflies flickered in the dusk. Children tossed a ball in the distance. The world felt impossibly gentle. Mrs. Harrison leaned beside Anna and asked, "What was your home like?" Anna stumbled over her answer, unused to being asked about her life, not her usefulness. "Beautiful," she whispered. "Before?" "Most places were beautiful before," Mrs. Harrison replied. "War takes more than land. It takes the stories." Anna nodded, tears stinging the back of her eyes. That night, lying in her bunk back at camp, she opened her diary, a thin notebook she'd kept hidden since France, and wrote, "They treat us better than our own officers. They speak softly. They listen. They let us breathe. Here, even the wind feels free." She paused, her pencil hovering. Then she added, "I think I am learning what freedom means." Not the propaganda version she grew up with, not a definition carved by ideology, but something simpler, something deeper. Freedom meant respect. It meant dignity. It meant having a voice, even a small one. It meant being seen as a person, not a tool. It meant humanity. By the end of August, Anna felt something she never expected to feel in a prison camp. Belonging. Not to the country, not to the war, but to the idea that goodness could exist even in the darkest chapter of history. Across the barbed wire, across accents and uniforms and wounds, human beings had reached for each other, and connected. And that connection, fragile as it was, felt more powerful than anything ideology had ever promised her. The day the gates opened, the sun rose over Camp Hearn with a gentleness that felt almost ceremonial. Dew clung to the grass. The Texas air carried the smell of warm earth. The war was over. Papers had been signed. Orders delivered. The prisoners would be sent home. Home. The word tasted uncertain. The German women gathered near the transport trucks, holding the few belongings they'd collected during their months in America. Letters, hand-sewn handkerchiefs, wooden carvings gifted by camp workers, and for Anna, the small Bible given by the chaplain. She held it carefully, as though afraid the moment she set foot outside American soil it might vanish like a dream. The American guards lined the fence in quiet rows. No rifles raised, no orders barked. Their posture was not one of victory or dominance, but of farewell. Private Miller stood near the gate, his cap tilted back, hands hooked loosely in his pockets. When he saw Anna approach, he offered the same warm nod he had given her on that first disorienting day. "You take care now, ma'am," he said softly. Anna tried to answer, but her voice caught. Instead, she reached out, gripping his hand through the fence for a brief, trembling moment. His thumb pressed gently against her knuckles, a gesture that said more than words could. She stepped back, blinking rapidly, trying and failing to stop the tears rising in her eyes. When the women climbed onto the truck bed, Greta turned to the group, voice shaking. "We arrived as enemies," she whispered. "We leave as witnesses." Heads bowed, shoulders shook. Some women pressed hands to their mouths to hold back sobs. Others cried openly, unashamed. As the truck engine rumbled to life, Anna looked back one last time. She saw the bathhouse where she first cried under warm water. The infirmary where her wounds were treated with gentle hands. The mess hall where bacon broke her in ways bullets never could. The fence where she learned the word howdy and understood kindness in an accent she once feared. The live oak tree where she first felt human again, and she saw the Americans, standing straight-backed, respectful, dignified, not gloating, not triumphant, simply present. Her chest tightened painfully. Gratitude felt like a weight she did not know how to carry. When the truck rolled forward, dust rising behind it, she whispered to the wind, "Thank you." Germany greeted them not with warmth, but with silence. The port where they landed looked nothing like the vibrant world they had left. Buildings lay open to the sky, roofs torn away like paper, streets twisted around piles of stone and broken glass. People moved like ghosts, gaunt and gray-faced, eyes hollowed by years of starvation. Munich was worse. Anna walked through her old neighborhood with her breath held tight in her chest. Her childhood home was gone, bombed to its foundations. The bakery where she once bought pretzels with her father was a blackened shell. The school she attended as a girl had been turned into a makeshift shelter crowded with families who had nothing left. She clutched her Bible as though it could shield her from the reality unfolding around her. Greta found her later, standing in the remains of a street they both recognized. "So, this is what we returned to," Greta murmured. "Nothing." Anna shook her head. "Not nothing," she said quietly. "We return with the truth." She told her neighbors about Texas, about the food, about the respect, about the Americans who treated them not as animals or enemies, but as women, as workers, as humans. She watched disbelief cross their faces, then confusion, then something like hope. "America fed us," Anna said, "protected us, treated us like humans. I did not know such mercy was possible in war." The stories spread faster than she expected. Some refused to believe them. Others clung to them as evidence that the world still had goodness left in it. One evening, an elderly neighbor placed a trembling hand on Anna's arm. "My son died believing the Americans would torture him," she whispered, "if only he had known." Anna held the woman as she cried, knowing there was no answer that could mend such grief. Years passed. Germany rebuilt, slowly at first, then swiftly, as new governments rose, as children were born, as memories faded into the heavy pages of history. But Anna never forgot Camp Hearn. Its lessons shaped her life, colored her choices, softened the edges of her world view. When she married and had children of her own, she told them stories not of battles, but of kindness, not of ideology, but of decency. She taught them that mercy was not weakness, that it was, in fact, the strongest force she had ever encountered, and when her daughter asked her once if she hated the Americans for winning, Anna shook her head. "They did not win by hurting us," she said. "They won by showing us who they were." In the decades that followed, Anna was interviewed many times by historians and journalists seeking to understand the strange generosity of American POW camps. Each time she gave the same answer. It was not the food or the safety that changed us. It was the dignity, the simple dignity. They treated us as humans, as equals, as people worthy of mercy. She paused, then added the sentence she believed with all her heart. "That is how America won." Had any American from Camp Hearn heard her words, they would have felt the same emotions their grandchildren feel today when they learn these stories. Pride, that their nation acted with integrity when the world was burning. Nostalgia, for a time when unity was stronger than division. Gratitude, for a generation that believed morality mattered, even in war. Wonder, at the idea that kindness could travel across oceans and decades, touching lives long after the guns went silent. Anna kept her Bible until the end of her life. Its pages grew worn from years of handling. The leather softened from countless readings on quiet evenings. But she treasured it not for its scripture, but for what it represented. The moment an enemy recognized her as a human being. The inscription inside the front cover, written by the chaplain, remained untouched. "To Anna, may mercy guide you." And it did. In the final lines of her diary, written many years after the war, Anna captured the truth that had shaped her life since Texas. In World War II, America defeated its enemies not only with strength, but with mercy, and mercy is something the world never forgets.